Hi guys, Mrs. Collier here with PA History. We are looking at Chapter 9, Lesson 1 today, but we're only going to read half the chapter and we'll take care of the other half later this week. So I have here a copy of the textbook page so you could follow along as I read to you. It's page 231. But some things I want you to think about as you're reading. We want to be able to remember our question words and be thinking about the text as we read it, asking ourselves questions in our mind. So you want to think as we read about who's involved, what's happening, where is it happening, and when is it happening? Especially when we're reading about history, you want to always make sure you come up with questions in your mind that help you to focus on the events and who's involved with them. So let's start by reading about the Underground Railroad. In the 1850s, the North and the South had different ideas about slavery. Many Northerners wanted to end slavery, but the Southerners did not. Think about it. Are we in the North or are we in the South? We are in the North. Southerners believed that the South's economy depended on slavery. Tensions grew between the two parts of the United States. Since the early 1800s, Pennsylvanians had been helping enslaved people on the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was not a real railroad. Instead, it was a system of secret routes used by people escaping slavery. Some people who opposed slavery, and opposed means to be against it, offered their homes or barns as safe houses. Slaves hid there during the day and traveled at night. The map on this page, you can see, shows some of the main routes or routes on the Underground Railroad. And you can see that here with the red lines. Now, in the Learning Extension tab on the website, you will find some of those myths that were mentioned here on the Underground Railroad. So I encourage you to go check them out. Okay, next paragraph. It was risky to be part of the Underground Railroad. In 1850, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act. This act required citizens to return fugitives, or those enslaved people who had escaped to freedom, to slavery. People helping fugitives could be fined or put in jail. So people that were trying to help those that were trying to escape could get in a lot of trouble. Many people in Pennsylvania, such as Lucretia Coffin Mott, William Still, and Frederick Douglass, were all abolitionists, or people who worked to end slavery. William Still, who was the child of former slaves, later worked as the secretary for the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. His home in Philadelphia was a safe house. Because Pennsylvania was located between the slave states of Maryland and West Virginia and the free states of New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania was a key link in the Underground Railroad. So my question is, as it is showing there, why did abolitionists work to end slavery? What was their reason? Give me a second to think about that. Well, as we read in the passage, abolitionists believed no one should be enslaved. They were against. Abolitionist comes from the word abolish, meaning to get rid of. They did not want people to be enslaved. They thought no one should be enslaved. Okay, now moving on to page 232. Building tensions lead to war. Again, we want to be thinking about those same questions. Who's involved? What's happening? Where is it happening? When is it happening? In 1856, Pennsylvania's James Buchanan was elected president. He tried to bring the North and the South to an agreement about slavery, but he did not succeed. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln, who opposed the spread of slavery, meaning he did not believe in it, was elected president. Lincoln believed that the national government should prevent slavery from spreading to new states. To protest Lincoln's election, South Carolina seceded or broke away from the United States in December 1860. Soon, a total of 11 Southern states seceded to form the Confederate States of America, or the Confederacy. The states that remained in the United States became known as the Union. So at this point in history, we have two sides that believe in totally different things. We have the Confederates and we have the Union. The Confederates were those who lived in the southern states, and the Union were those who lived in the northern states. And they had two totally different ideas about slavery. People in the Union did not believe there should be slavery, but the people in the Confederate states believed that it was okay to have slavery. Reading on. On his way to Washington, D.C. to become president in 1861, Lincoln gave a speech in Philadelphia. In it, he said, "There shall be no bloodshed unless it is forced upon the government." Unfortunately, it was. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate troops fired cannons at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Upon hearing the news, a group of 350 volunteer soldiers from Pennsylvania went to Washington to protect the capital. They became known as the First Defenders. More than 330,000 Pennsylvania soldiers would follow them into war. So, how do you think Lincoln felt about sending Union troops to fight the Southerners? Here you have a president of an entire country, and now this country is at war with each other. So how do you think Abraham Lincoln felt about having to do that? Think about that for a second. Well, I'm thinking he probably felt very unhappy and sad about having to do that because he didn't really want his country to be at war. It's one thing to be at war with another country, but to have your own people fighting against each other because they do not believe in the same things. Did you know that the Civil War is the only war ever fought on American soil that were where we were against each other? It's kind of sad, actually. So let's take a look at this map and look at Confederates and the Union a little bit more. So looking at the map, are there any Confederate states? Remember, Confederate is the southern states. Are any of them, do they border Pennsylvania at all? Take a look at the key here. So we have the blue is the Union states. The red is the Confederate states. These are still territories that have not really become part of the United States at this point. But then we have these states here that are kind of striped, red and blue. What do you think of that means? Well, it basically means that these states here really had mixed opinions. So some of the people believed that there should be slavery and wanted to be part of the Confederate States. And then there are other people that did not believe in slavery and wanted to be part of the Union States, but they couldn't come together and make a decision. So these were called border states, states that kind of had mixed feelings about the whole idea of slavery. So that was kind of interesting. And I'm wondering if during the time of war, how that impacted these states here. If you had half the people that were fighting for slavery and then you had the other half fighting against it, how that impacted the people of those states. Well, that's it for today. So what I want you to do is there's a mini biography on Abraham Lincoln attached to the website, and it talks about the role he played in the Civil War. And then there's a little paragraph that you should fill in at the bottom of that page. Have your parents take a picture of your completed page and email it to either myself or Mrs. Redard, and make sure they put the word Abraham Lincoln in the subject line, because it'll be easier for us to find that information when we get it. Don't forget to check out the learning extension activities we have on the page on the Underground Railroad and on Abraham Lincoln. And I will look forward to talking with you on Wednesday about what comes next in the Civil War. Bye for now.